For 23 long years, we have waited for the day that Mystical Space Typhoon negates. Now, we finally have it. So, I'm going to be bringing you, as you've probably already guessed, a Radiant Typhoon deck profile. Now, this is predominantly pure, and what I mean by that one is it only focuses on the Radiant Typhoons with some supporting members. It doesn't involve Runick. If you wanted to play Runick with it, that is probably one of the most competitive ways to play this particular deck. There is a very small Sky Striker package in here, but I'll explain to you what you could sub out for that place. And what I like about the Sky Striker package in this deck is it does give you the ability to draw very much, because what that will allow you to do is you're setting yourself up with loads of spell cards in your graveyard, and then engage just becomes a search, draw, engage, search, draw, and then you've pretty much got what you need to. But you can very easily sub that engine out, and I'll talk that when I get to it. So, with that out of the way, smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Let's start off with the core card of the entire deck, Mystical Space Typhoon. So, if you don't know what this card does, where have you been? Target a spell or trap card on the field and destroy that target. This is the original way of dealing with spells and traps. Back in 2002, I believe, when it was first introduced to the TCG. And then you can see all of the followers from that point on. You've got stuff like Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclones. Technically, you could argue that it branched into Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm, but Mystical Space Typhoon is one in its own. And what I really love about this is that all of the cards gain additional effects when Mystical Space Typhoon is either activated or if it is in the graveyard, and there are ways of being able to search Mystical Space Typhoon back from the grave or the deck. It's just absolutely insane and such a core component. Because being able to go draw phase, Mystical Space Typhoon, no matter what your opponent has, it's really, really good, and it actually makes you feel good about blind hitting with something like a Mystical Space Typhoon. Moving into the Radiant monsters, start off with the level 3. So we're going to start off with Radiant Typhoon Sven. So this one is if you have Mystical Space Typhoon in your graveyard or your opponent controls no spells or traps, you get to special on this card from the hand. You can only special summon Radiant Typhoon Sven once per turn this way. If this guy is normal or special, you get to add a Radiant Typhoon spell, trap, or Mystical Space Typhoon from the deck to the hand. Now, mainly what you're going to want to be doing is adding the Radiant Typhoon spell or trap, and the Mystical Space Typhoon is already in the graveyard, and there will be cards later on that will bring that back. Then we play 3 Radiant Typhoon Eldam. So if you have Mystical Space Typhoon in the graveyard or your opponent has no spells or traps, again, you get to special on this card from the hand, which means, as you can tell when we go through this profile, you just can use any normal summon engine for your entire deck. If you wanted to, you could play the adventure package. If you wanted to, you could even trial out a Lava Golem, because just being able to go Lava Golem, clear off, and go is pretty crazy. You get special on this card from the hand. You can only special on it once per turn that way. If this card is normal or special, you get to add a Radiant Typhoon monster or a Mystical Space Typhoon from the deck to the hand. And then your ideal starter for the Radiant Typhoon monsters themselves is going to be your Radiant Typhoon Megala. So if you have Mystical Space Typhoon in the grave or your opponent has no spells and traps, again, like its predecessors, you get to special on this card from the hand. However, if a Radiant Typhoon quick play spell card or Mystical Space Typhoon is activated except during the damage step, you get to special on a Radiant Typhoon monster from the deck with a different name than the monsters you control. However, you can't special on for the rest of the turn except win monsters, which is absolutely fine because that's what we're going to be focusing on anyway. This one does need a little bit more setup because this one's going to need you to activate a Mystical Space Typhoon, but that can then get you into the Eldam to search a monster or the Sven to search you out a Radiant Typhoon spell or trap. Then I wouldn't say your main boss monster, but your main like high level one is going to be 3 Radiant Typhoon Crocea. So cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect while your opponent controls no spells or traps. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If a quick play spell card is activated on either player's side of the field, you get to special on this card from the hand. If this card is normal or special, you get to add a Radiant Typhoon card, except itself, and or a Mystical Space Typhoon from the deck and or graveyard back to the hand. You can't special on for the rest of the turn except wins, which is absolutely fine, but what makes this card so good is it's a defensive wall and it lets you recycle your cards from the grave, or if you're not already in the graveyard, you get to add them to the hand directly, and that's when you're going to be able to cook a little bit more. Then we're playing one of each of the boss monsters. I do feel that I could very easily play a second Phonix, the Great Flame, but it's one of the ones that I only own one, and I felt like playing one is absolutely fine. Like 2 is very much down to personal preference. So if a quick play spell card is activated except during damage state, you special summon it. And then if a quick play spell card is activated except during damage state, you get to target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and you shuffle them back into the deck. If Mystical Space Typhoon is activated while this card is in the grave, you special summon it. Then we have the Radiant Typhoon Varuru, the Vibrant Vortex. Why? Why so many of these? So if a quick play spell card is activated, etc. in down step, special summon it, and it's the reverse of the Great Flame. Great Flame is the 3k attacker, this is the 3k defender. When your opponent activates a monster effect and you have Mystical Space Typhoon in the graveyard, quick effect, negate the effect. Then if you have 2 or more Mystical Space Typhoons in the graveyard, you get to destroy that monster. If Mystical Space Typhoon is activated while this card is in the grave, you special summon it. So there's just ways of constantly keep getting these walls back into play. Then for the spell cards, we're on 3, Radiant Typhoon, Chant. So if it's destroyed by the effects of Mystical Space Typhoon, you get to set this card. You get to activate one of these effects, but you can only use each effect once per turn, so having multiples of this is not that bad. So you add a level 4 or lower Radiant Typhoon monster from the deck to the hand, so it's your rotor of the deck, and then you also get to add, or a different one or a second copy, add a Mystical Space Typhoon from the deck or grave back to the hand. So you recycle back the Mystical Space Typhoon, and then you get to pretty much go from there. Then the one that is probably the most commonly known, and I'm so glad that this card was a common, because if it was any higher, it would have been a pain, is 3 Radiant Typhoon Vision. So again, if it's destroyed by the effects of Mystical Space Typhoon, you get to reset it. You get to use, activate one of these effects, but you can only use each effect once per turn, so multiples is never that bad of a thing. So the second effect, add Mystical Space Typhoon from deck or grave, so pretty standard. The best effect is draw 2 cards, and then if you have a Radiant Typhoon card or a quick play spell in the hand, discard one of them, or the entire hand if you don't. Very rare you should be losing your entire hand when you're playing this deck, but that sometimes does come up, but it is a quick play Allure of Darkness. And then the final Radiant Typhoon quick play spell card is Radiant Typhoon Manifestation. So again, destroyed by Mystical Space Typhoon, you can set it again, and you can use each of the effects. So either add Mystical Space Typhoon from the grave or the deck to the hand, or send a Radiant Typhoon monster from the deck to the grave. So send your big guys like your Phonics or the Varu, and that will then allow you to set them up to bring them back a little bit later on. The final Radiant Typhoon monster is Radiant Typhoon Mandate. So once per turn, you get to target 3 quick play spell cards in your graveyard, including a Radiant Typhoon card. Apply the following effects in sequence. Shuffle them back into the deck to draw 1 card, and then all monsters you control gain 300 attack and defense this turn. Once per chain, when Mystical Space Typhoon is activated, you get to target a face-up card your opponent controls. Negate its effects! Mystical Space Typhoon now negates. Great success. And then if this card is destroyed by card effect of Mystical Space Typhoon, you get to set it back. So if your opponent tries to destroy it, chain your own Mystical Space Typhoon, destroy this, and then it will reset itself, which is really good. And then moving on to like the supporting cast of this deck. 2 Emergency Teleport. A massive shout out to, I want to say Cog Lime. So apologies if I get it wrong, but Cog Lime 3639 did a very, very in-depth build, dive into this entire deck. But they were using Emergency Teleport and Ghost Fairy Euphorbia. Now this card was actually picked up for the Killer Tunes, which we get in December. But what I like about this one is once per turn, you reveal a win monster in your hand. Until the end of your opponent's next main phase 1, monsters with a level higher than the reveal monster cannot activate their effects, which is absolutely crazy because you just go ETL, summon this out, use the effect, reveal one of your level 3s ideally, and then everything that is higher than level 3 cannot activate the effects. Use this as overlay material for one of your rank 3s, and you pretty much just stump your opponent until their main phase 2. So it confirms that you're going to survive the turn, and then builds on from there, which I thought was kind of an interesting option. You can take these cards out, and then that's when you can put in more direct hand traps. I decided to go for like more breakers than I did go for hand traps, but that is really entirely up to you. For the Sky Striker package, I'm on 3 Sky Striker Engage with the 1 Widow Anchor and the 1 Hornet Drones. Now, as I've already mentioned, you're not really focusing on, you only really want to activate this once you've got your 3 spells in the graveyard. Once you do that, your Engage is always going to become a pot of greed. So you'd go Engage, Search Out, Drones. You don't always need to go into Kagari because you've only got 2 Sky Striker targets, so you're only ever going to be resolving Engage twice. But the idea is that you go Engage, Drones, you can go into Kagari, add back the Engage, get you Widow Anchor, and then you've already drawn 2 cards off the back of that. You could take this entire package out, and that's when you play Pot of Extravagance. It is completely optional. What I liked about this is it was an Engage that led me to either a win monster should I want it, it led me to an Extender, it can then also lead you to a Negate. Another target that you can also play is the Mobilize, trying to remember Afterburners, not Afterburners, sorry, but you technically could play Afterburners, but the one that lets you protect the card that is in your extra monster zone. So what you can do with that one is you can put all of your monsters, like you'd go into your rank 3s, you can go into Zeus or anything like that, put that into your extra monster zone, and then activate that, and then that would then protect them from being destroyed by card effects, and by battle as well if you have 3 spell cards. So it just turns your monster in your extra monster zone as like a little mini towers, which is really annoying for your opponent to try and deal with. Then we've got 2 Forbidden Chalice. This is just an alternative to Infinite Impermanence, but the idea is it's a quick play spell card, so you're going to be able to trigger off your Radiant cards a lot more consistently, and again, is completely optional whether you want to play it or not. Then 3 Forbidden Droplet. Another way that you can make these cards even more consistent is you can play Condemned Witch, but because of the Sky Striker package, I decided not to do that. But the idea behind that would be that you'd normal summon Condemned Witch. Condemned Witch could then search you out Forbidden Droplet or Forbidden Chalice, whereas I'd much rather just max out on both of those and kind of go down that route and not rely on my normal summon. Then the final quick play we're utilising is 3 Super Polymerization. The idea behind all of this is you're playing quick play spell cards. You don't really worry about your extra deck. There's nothing in the extra deck that you must summon. They're just cards that give you a little bit more extension to your plays. They're a little bit ways of breaking your opponent's field and can be very, very important. So when you start to look at the extra deck or other cards you can add into the deck, you can look at stuff like Book of Eclipse, you could look at any other kind of quick play spell card which is going to be more utilised for you. You could upgrade to Cosmic Cyclones, not that you really need to, and then you could look at other field breakers, so Dark Rule on the Moor, Evenly Matched, Nibiru's, Drone Lock Birds, Perulias, Fugalosses, you name it, you can adapt it, you can utilise it. So that's it for the entire main deck. Now to move on to the extra deck. For the extra deck, you just really want to be playing generic wind monsters. You do play some that are not all wind, but it gives you a bit more flexibility. So for our highest level Link monster, we're going to be playing the one Desperate Doom Eagle. The idea behind this one is it gains 2,400 attack points while your opponent has no monster in the graveyard. You have a quick effect to target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and shuffle it back into the deck. So it's a really nice way of technically being a DD Crow, but also a Bestial by recycling them back into the deck, which can be very, very disruptive. Then we've got the one Great Fly backed up by Wind, the Wind Charmer. You don't have to play these, but the idea behind this one is the Great Fly lets all of your wind monsters gain 500 attack and defense, so all of your monsters become that little bit stronger and more annoying to deal with. And then Wind, the Wind Charmer is pretty generic. Revive a wind from your opponent's graveyard, rare that's going to happen, but more so if it's destroyed by card effect, you get to add a 1,500 or less defense wind monster from the deck to the hand. For the Sky Strikers, you've got the one Hayate and the one Kagari. So if you're locked into winds, you can go straight into Hayate. Hayate can obviously attack directly as well, but then you've also got Kagari to recycle, and then if you need to, you can turn your Kagari into Hayate to unlock another zone pointing down. One SP Little Knight, you can play Donna Dagger Furhire. The idea is just to clear out your extra monster zone, but it is entirely up to you. Our 2 super body targets in Garura and Mud Dragon. Again, you can make these a bit more prominent if you wish to. You can play stuff like Predaplant Dracostopelia. You could play Secturion Dragon, depending on what you're going to be facing at your environment, and kind of adapt it that way. For our XEs, we play free wind rank 3s. Kincada King, Gossip Shadow, and Totem Bird. So Totem Bird being your Spell and Trap Negator, your Bamboozling Gossip Shadow being your Monster Negator, and then technically your Kincada King can also be a Negator. But it's one of the ones that if you get locked into wind, you can make these very easily because you've got your Megala, your Eldam, and your Sven are all level 3s. I wished one of them was a tuner, which is why you could play Ghost Ogre with Emergency Teleport and then go that little step further. The other rank 3 that we're playing is the one number 49 Fortune Tune. Now this of course isn't a wind, but the idea behind this one is you get a defensive rank 3 on the field, attack, and then rank it up into a Zeus. You obviously got its brother Typhoon, and then the last card we're playing is the one Dragon Lark. This is one of the ones that if you overlay 2 Crocea, which can be a little bit rare to happen, but if you do, this gives you a ability that it can't be destroyed by battle or card effect, quite like Way into Zeus. You can also detach a material from this card, target level 5 or lower monster in the grave, and special summon it, so it gets you recycle back your level 3 Radiant monsters as well. So that's it for the entire deck profile. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, please put in the comments down below. As previously mentioned, you can play this with a range of different supporting options. You can go, I know you can play a very small Radiant package inside Sky Strikers, which if you want to do that, you can do. You can obviously combine this with Runick, which is probably the most effective and most competitive viable option for the deck as well. But it really kind of comes down to if you want to be creative and try and play it pure, try and make it so that Mystical Space Typhoon does negate. This is one of the best options for you on that one, and it does give you a little bit of flexibility. You could adapt it into a Genesis style if you wanted to. I'm just going to pull up my Genesis list so I can have an idea on the points, because I think the points were like crazy high just because I was playing so many breaker cards. But the idea behind this one is that it gives you the ability to sub some of those out. So most of the points are used up in Emergency Teleport, so you take that out, that's 80 points saved straight away. Then for your extra deck, you've got Gossip Shadow, which is 70 points. So again, you would take that out, sub that for a different rank 3. You could play other quick play spell cards, but the idea is the whole Radiant Typhoon archetype is 0 points. The Sky Striker package is 0 points because you can't get into Link monsters, so you'd only be using it as a draw option, so you take that out completely as well. And that's where I would probably consider looking at stuff like ways of being able to get you into maybe synchro plays, or you just turn it into a full-on control build, and that's when you'd start looking at other cards you can utilize and get away with, so like Book of Eclipses, Condemned Witches, and cards like that. I'm not going to be adapting it directly to a Genesis version as of right now. But if you do want to see it, get the video above 50 likes, and I'll be more than happy to adapt it so you've got a updated version for the Genesis format as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Do like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.